By now, those who are not already dead are fleeing into the Shiver Peaks.
Then we go to the Shiver Peaks.
A noble gesture, but throwing your lives away against a foe who you cannot beat will not help your friends.
Then the White Mantle have won. All is lost.
Do not be so sure. There is still a way to beat the White Mantle. Venture to the Crystal Desert and ascend. Only then will you be powerful enough to take on the rest of the White Mantle and their unseen gods. Find the Prophet and claim the gift of true sight. And now you must venture through the desert. Prove yourselves worthy and claim your birthright. Then you will take this fight to them. Prepare yourselves. The trials of ascension await.
Let's all pretend for a second that it's still before Path of Fire came out, and what we're about to do is get ourselves all up on the same level of understanding about the regions of the world we're about to visit in this expansion, in excitement and anticipation for being able to go there 250 years in the future, or one sequel in the future in Guild Wars 2. Yeah, I wanted to do this for so long, and I'm gonna do it, because screw it, it's been so fun experiencing the Crystal Desert, how it's translated into the second game. And I feel like I should do a production like this just so that people can understand how different or how the same certain things are between the two games, because that's been such a huge part of my joy. So today, what we're going to do is play some Guild Wars 1. I always enjoy when I get to return to this game meaningfully, and we're going to be checking out the regions of the world that Path of Fire give us, but how they originally were implemented. So we'll start today with purely the Crystal Desert. And then in the future, we'll look into maybe doing the Desolation in a video and then eventually Vabi in a video. And it's funny because in Guild Wars 2, 3 of the open world maps kind of cover this territory, while only 1 map is dedicated to each of the other 2 regions, even though each feels like a video all on its own. So how I opened this production was with a cutscene. That cutscene takes place at the end of a mission in Crater. So in the main storyline, you find out that the White Mantle have been betrayed, the people at the Henge of Denravi in the Maguma Jungle, the previous Guild Wars 2 expansion, have been slaughtered, and we rush in Guild Wars 1 from the jungle to the desert. It's kind of odd actually, now as I record this I realise we did the same in Guild Wars 2 in a weird way. We rushed from the jungle to the desert. But so here on Sanctum K, we find out about this great betrayal, and the Vizier explains to us, hey, if you want to fight the Massar, you need to ascend. That is why the Guild Wars 1 characters come to this region of the world, and really it's all about this place here, Augury Rock. Augury Rock in the Guild Wars 2 story, as we now know for Path of Fire, really is more of a side thing, and it's well presented, but it's not the main reason. The main reason more than anything else, I guess, would be some of the stuff up here and as we go further to the south, which obviously have prominence in this game too, but we'll get to that in a second. So you just saw that cutscene where we raised a boat from the depths of the sea. That's the boat, and this is how we first arrive in the Crystal Desert. This is known as the Amnon Oasis. In the first game, you had special outposts that were like of a different icon, and they were big. They were technically called towns. Not all towns were genuinely relevant for the game. So like Lion's Arch was a very big town in Guild Wars 1 in terms of player populations, as was Droknar's Forge right at the start of Prophecies. The other campaigns have significant towns, but they also had their share of towns that people didn't really go to very much. Ascalon City was a big one as well for Guild Wars 1, just because that's where it all kind of started. But the Amnon Oasis has never really been a very popular outpost. In fact, the entire region, if you notice, is just this collection of maps here with no actual physical route to walk to them. Now that's true in Guild Wars 2 also, because we never got a route from Ebonhawk. There's no actual direct method of getting here without participating in the main story. You had to do Sanctum K to get here, or you had to do some Nightfall story a couple of years down the line to come up from the south instead. So that made it quite unique. Everywhere else in Prophecies, really, with the exception of the final area, the Fire Island Chain, you could walk to. You could find a way to, like through the Shiver Peaks, you could have done Balder's Pass and the Frostgate, or you could have walked through the Iron Horse Mine and the Anvil Rock and down through the Deljamor Bowl, the Griffin's Mouth, and so on. I always get a sense that things are much bigger in Guild Wars 1, and I'll try to refrain from going on and on about that in this game, in this video, sorry. It obviously is a result of a lot of different things, such as the movement speed we have, the amount of time we spend in combat, the fact that we can't jump. You know, in Guild Wars 2 exploring this area, you can just hop, skip over anything you like with mounts. But in Guild Wars 1, if I wanted to walk to a certain place, it would usually involve a long, meandering, winding route taking me through teleporters and stuff. Anyway, so yeah, this is the Oasis. Obviously, it still exists in Guild Wars 2 Amnon. It's the site of the meta event with the casino coins and stuff. Very desolate here. And really all we have are just some horrible, roughed up looking tents and not much else. In Guild Wars 2, there is an underwater place called Old Amnon, which is maybe what we're looking at right now. Maybe this got flooded like a lot of the other areas, and if they're even remotely consistent about what happened with Lion's Arch, I would suggest that that's the idea. But I think the point is that the people that you see in these tents here, these random merchants, they eventually will build the Amnon you see in the second game with those enormous lush pyramids and striving for their independence from Palawa Joko. And so I think it's really nice to see sort of the humble origins of this place. While I was always excited to go there in Guild Wars 2, if you actually look at it in the original game, there's sweet FA going on. There's just ruins left over from the Forgotten, and we see lots of these in Guild Wars 2, and they look so good in Guild Wars 2. Not much else going on. This was also at a point, I will add, where there weren't many quests to do anymore. They really started dropping off around the time of the Maguma Jungle. After the Prophecies release, they did add some more, but most of the quests here were to do with attribute points or changing your secondary profession. So you didn't manage to get that much lore there. There is a specific ghostly NPC that we can speak to, who is the ghost of Chiriosa, who's kind of our companion through this story arc. Who's helping us to ascend, as that's why he came to the desert once long ago, and his story again would be expanded on in Nightfall. He's also someone you can meet in Path of Fire. But as always, in Guild Wars 1, you can get lore about outposts and things, something I very much missed from the second game, and I know how arbitrary it is to say that. But here, we got the Amnon Oasis. For travelers into the desert, this tiny harbor, guys, not giant pyramids, and there's a noble district and stuff. This tiny harbor represents a last chance to rest and resupply. It also provides one last view of water, the sight of which becomes increasingly rare as one ventures eastward. And I love that line there about water becoming rarer and rarer. Of course, as we know, the story of the gods and the fact that this was a frigging sea once before. So yeah, when you hear about this region of the world being a sea, right, being an ocean or whatever, that's not Guild Wars 1 stuff. That's like way before even Guild Wars 1. It's something we've never actually seen in the games at all. I think our one chance to have seen that would have been if the Abaddon Fractal was ever developed. And, of course, it wasn't in the end. So yeah, I want to take you guys on a little bit of a tour. We'll walk out into the Prophet's Path. So as we move through here, the game might be a bit rubber bandy and weird. I think the server infrastructure stuff's been changing on Guild Wars 1 quite a lot recently. I am connected pretty fast at the moment. I think I have like a ping of 15. And look at that, almost 300 FPS there. But you see my characters like bugging around like this. I don't know why Guild Wars 1 does this these days, but it does. I've heard it's to do with alt-tabbing and stuff, but I can't be entirely sure. But so yeah, this is the desert. Our first objective, behind us we can see a resurrection shrine there. That was mechanic in Guild Wars 1. If you died, you'd res at those. They're kind of like waypoints, but you can't teleport to them. They're just for resurrection. And you can see ruins of lots of those in Path of Fire. Our original objective as we traveled through this area was mostly just to get to Augury Rock. So there's a kind of like very direct route that we could take here. And I'll give you guys a little bit I won't run the whole way. Movement in this game is a lot slower, and you're kind of forced into doing a lot of fights. Even on really overpowered team comps, you kind of have to clear them out, otherwise the hero AI can get buggy and then they can end up dying and lost on their own and so forth. But yeah, so this was our original objective. As you traveled, you were kind of vaguely following these pillars as you went along. That the Forgotten had left behind. And it's funny because what I'm showing you right now is the very start of our exploration into the Crystal Desert in Guild Wars 1. For the sequel, for Path of Fire, it's not until the third map that we're in this region of the world. It's not until the third map that we start actually dealing with teleporter switches in this fashion, beyond the one mastery point one that we had earlier. So here, I'll take a second to kill. If you look at my party window, everybody's dying. In fact, I'm dead there anyway, because I'm trying to rush too much for you guys. But there's a teleport switch, and we can move on through. Our goal eventually is to get to Augury Rock. So let's just teleport there, and I'll show you guys a little bit of this. In fact, what I'll do is I'll go back out into the Prophet's Path. And I'll show you what the entrance was like from that perspective. So we've got lots of little NPCs here. There is one specific boss, Kefket, that you could farm for greens, I think, in the Prophet's Path somewhere to the south. But yeah, as we follow it along, you see the loading screen every time we hit a loading screen here? That is showing Augury Rock. It was all about this. And so eventually we come to this outpost on the edge. Where I'm currently stood, okay, this is where the meta event takes place, where that Carindia character, I think her name is, where she tries to open it up. Of course, it's branded in the second game. But get a sense of the difference of scale here, right? This is a tiny little defense event, really, in the sequel. Remember, we're all running around here on our skimmers and on our raptors and stuff, defending her before she opens this teleporter, and we teleport inside beyond the branded wall. When the first game, this is what it looks like. It's all the way over there, and that's Augury Rock standing out alone amongst the desert. So we can get a little bit of lore here as well. Augury Rock, surrounded by the mysterious pillars, like stone guardians, this overlook is named for the immense crag that looms in the distance, beckoning any brave enough to approach. Do not be deceived, the rock guards its secrets well. So this was something really fun. Prophecies was incredibly linear. The whole story was like, go this way, the excuse for a world tour. The most exciting thing to me about the Crystal Desert mechanically in the first game was this was the first opportunity we had to choose what mission order we would do. So the story would take us here. And I suppose, interestingly, Augury Rock is the name of this area, not the actual rock itself. Well, I guess they both are. Anyway. Once you came here, you realized you had no access, and you needed to participate in these rituals that Shirai also would help you through by going to other areas of the desert. And you could go to Alona Reach first if you liked, the Thirsty River first if you liked, or the Dunes of Despair first, but you had to explore the desert and get all three of these done. And each was like, this isn't like in Guild Wars 2 where there's a little thing where, you know, maybe the next 10 minutes you have some order to do. This was like several hours of gameplay that you could take into your own hands what order you wanted to do things in. Some of these missions were harder than others, notoriously the Thirsty River being the hardest of all of them. But once you finally had all of them done, and we will go to those, but I'll just skip ahead for a second here. Once you have all of them done, you could speak to the ritual priest here, who says, "Welcome! Chirai Oster informed me of your arrival," and we can say, "How do we get to the Mesa?" He says, "Before you gain entrance, you must first pass 3 tests. The former commanders of Alona await you at the base of the rock itself, and they'll tell you all you need to know." So we can go on in here. Oh god, see the weird lagginess. You notice this is a solo instance too. This never really happened in Prophecies, but this is a solo instance. And so here's the 3 commanders. Each would teach you about his respective challenge and trial. Now that I talk to them though, they say, "Oh, hey, well done, you've accomplished your job." So what I can do here is, because I finished all the missions, I can bathe myself in the divine light. The Divine Fire, sorry. And the Divine Fire was referenced in Season 2 of The Living World, if you guys remember in the library instance. All of this was referenced, actually. And we can stand on each of these glyphs. Each of these glyphs represents one of the 3 missions, one of the 3 trials. And with all of them done, you can see the rock itself. The rock in Guild Wars 1, you'll notice, had the 3 glyphs printed on it. I'm not sure that's there in Guild Wars 2 anymore. That's actually just a big branded wall, right? And then the whole thing will explode open in what will look quite cheesy, all right? But bear with it. This was one of the coolest moments of Prophecies for me. Explodes open, look at this. We don't get this animation in the sequel. There's no water even here in the sequel. In the sequel, this little area here is just a kind of a small sandy area. And this long staircase opens up, which we walk through in the cutscene. So we don't physically really get to walk in. This will take us inside Augury Rock. So this is the site of the meta in Path of Fire. You guys know what it's like. You can collect all the pieces of the Flameseeker prophecies. This is the Guild Wars 1 equivalent. And so one of the things I was most excited about in POF was the fact you could go into the catacombs here. And you'll see that they are actually hinted at in this cutscene and in this room. But we could never do it in the original game. And the same with the upper levels too. Really all we get, as you'll see once this cutscene ends, is just a sort of small space that we can run around on. This character we're looking at here is our doppelganger. He's a deadly foe with the exact same build that we have. And he's going to continue attacking me if I'm not careful. In fact, he might even kill me. You'll notice the bonus was to defeat him in under 10 minutes. A 1v1, that the challenge was to beat the 1v1 in less than 10 minutes. So as you can see, he's actually totally messing me up here, which is quite terrifying. I'm messing him up even quicker though, so I guess we're okay. Oh god, wait, he's gonna beat me! He's gonna beat me! Oh my god, I beat him with 13 health. Wow. I really wanted to show you what the room looked like. Anyway, beautiful room, totally messed up in the sequel. There you go, that's Augury Rock. And by completing this mission, we ascend. This is our ascension, and we do get to experience this. All the NPCs in Guild Wars 2 are trying here still,
and take hold of your destiny.
but it is not possible for them as the gods have receded. And so yeah, that was Glint that spoke to us. From there, in the first game, we teleport up to the north. This is the Dragon's Lair. This is, again, the location of a story instance in Path of Fire. It's kind of become like this big, like, vortexy bowl thing in the sequel. Here, the Forgotten is still alive, though. The Forgotten have been present through all of these rituals, actually. The Forgotten is still around. Let's read the lore about this. The great dragon prophet Glint is not easy to find, for she uses powerful magics to make her lair inside a single crystalline grain of sand. A person could search 100 lifetimes and never find the exact grain. The only true entrance is through this portal, beyond the challenges of Augury Rock. So they never really well explained why this was beyond the challenges of Augury Rock. I don't really know what... was there a suggestion we teleported? I can't quite remember. Anyway, from here, the Forgotten would help us to teleport into her lair, which was in this sort of metaphysical place. There's a physical area you can walk through, of course, though, and this is the Tomb of the Primeval Kings. Now, quite interestingly, what the developers were doing in terms of mechanics in these campaign missions, the 3 that you could choose from, is they're actually teaching you about PvP mechanics, like what Capture the Flag is and Deathmatch and so on. And that's because originally this was then when a lot of the big structured tournament style PvP happened, Heroes Ascent. And that was a way back at the launch that this was where this all took place. Eventually this was repurposed into a PvP instance because they added a PvP special region called the Battle Isles later on. But this is the Tomb of the Primeval Kings. And so what I've loved about recording this video immediately with you guys is, you know, we've just gone from like Augury Rock, which in my opinion looked a lot grander in the original game than it did in the sequel. And now we're here at the Tomb of the Primeval Kings, which looks a lot grander in the sequel than it does in the original game. I mean, these statues look kind of cool, right? And I mean, it's got, you know, the demented, warped, messed up thing because of Abaddon's influence seeping in here. And, you know, it's got a certain flair to it, but it looks so good in the sequel. They really trumped it there. So we kind of get to see 2 interesting places there. One where Guild Wars 2 maybe didn't live up and another where it did, or, you know, these senses of scale and perspective really kind of get messed up. So, as I've explained, if you watch my video where I came to the Tomb of the Primeval Kings, in GW1, you can't just walk through there and walk in like you can in the sequel. If I try to walk in like so, I hit a loading screen and it teleports me to the underworld, immediately to the mists. And behind me in the mists, what do we see? Nothing, right? Because of the way that this was sort of all developed as a PvP thing. And so what is actually happening here is we don't really get to see the tombs themselves. And so that's another reason why it's that much more special in the sequel, to be able to see the tombs themselves. Reading the lore here, legends remain of noble spirits who stand watch over the tombs. If there's a passage between the mortal world and the underworld, surely such spirits would know how to find it. And in Guild Wars 2, we actually plead with them. We get to speak to those spirits, right? So yeah, that's kind of the core narrative. At that point, once we've done the Dragon's Lair and we meet with Glint, we take the fight back to the Massat, like you saw Vizier Kilbron was asking us to do way back when. And we go off to the Southern Shiver Peaks, and that's kind of it. There are more places to look at, though, that I do want to talk a bit about. First, let's talk about the Salt Flats. So really interestingly, this was one of my favorite areas. I loved the design of the desert here. It looked very different to a lot of the other areas. The Seeker's Passage is a small outpost just on the edge with these huge bones, and you'll remember that these huge bones return in GW2. We'll read the lore of the Seeker's Passage as well. Situated on the edge of the Great Salt Flats, this tiny outpost is named for the Seekers, pilgrims said to have crossed the desert in search of a new home. The bones of some massive creatures litters the area, a warning to the wise. And yeah, they left these bones here. I think actually in Guild Wars 2 when I saw those bones, I was thinking, are they trying to do something about the Giganticus Lupicus? And I don't know whether really they were probably just doing a callback to that. Anyway, so here's the Salt Flats. And I'm still solo here. I don't have my party, so I'll get ripped up if I try and go anywhere. But amazingly, in the second game, this place we stood at, this is just on the edge of Amnon. These are actually the Amnon farms. The Salt Flats, as we know them in Guild Wars 2, are actually like up here to the side of the Dragon's Lair, which is kind of weird that shifted. I guess they just had to take some liberties there as they did that. And then, like, this bottom area of the Shiver Peaks, we don't quite get to go to Marhan's Grotto and stuff, but this is all iced over, so it gets a bit weird in some places, and this is a good example. There's a very fun thing to talk about with the Salt Flats as well, also. and that is the existence of a statue of Glint here. Now, I'm running Guild Wars Toolbox. I could, in theory, dislocate my camera right now and just fly over to it, but I'll refrain from doing that, I guess. But there is a statue of Glint here, which was always kind of interesting as a landmark in the Crystal Desert, but was never truly explained, and we never knew whether it had any purpose. The devs could have, like many landmarks in Guild Wars 1, the devs could have left it there, just like that, and never talked about it. The funny thing about that Glint statue, though, is that in a panel, supposedly, in 2008, a Gamescom 2008 panel, we're talking 9 years ago, Rhys Osby said that this statue did have some more meaning and would be returned to at some point. And the statue never was. A little bit later as well, Jeff Grubb mentioned that the second novel, Edge of Destiny, would also talk about said statue, but the novel never did in the end. And so obviously it's just this unfortunate thing, and they've kind of been caught out a little bit there. But you would have thought Path of Fire, given us the Dragon's Lair, given us all that stuff, would have had more on the Glint statue. And to be honest with you, I haven't seen it in there. Maybe it is there. Maybe you guys can tell me in the comments. But that was something I was looking out for. And so far in the expansion, I haven't seen any reference to. And really, it's right near Amnon, or it would be quite near Amnon. So yeah. You've also got the Diviner's Ascent, another sort of beautiful area. I'll take you to Alona Reach. So this is one of the missions. This is a mission where you have to go talk to some... Well, hold on. Let's read the lore first. This desolate outpost overlooks the skeletal remains of what might once have been a bustling seaport. Brackish puddles are all that remain of the water that once meant life to fishermen and traders alike. Today, rotted pilings and tattered sailcloth are all that mark this ghost harbour. So the mission here actually involves us going to 3 priests, and their bones are still there in Guild Wars 2. We're kind of near the Temple of Cormyr on this one. All these wooden things, though, and all the ruins of these ships and these really quite surreal... Yeah, this almost looks like art in a way, right? None of this exists in Guild Wars 2. The devs didn't recreate this stuff. I don't know whether it was a resource management thing or whether they just realistically thought, okay, this wood should have rotted by now. This shouldn't be here. And maybe they decided to just get rid of it. But you kind of don't get much of this aesthetic. And I believe the Diviner's Ascent is quite similar there too. Here's something even more interesting maybe, and that's the areas of Destiny's Gorge and off on the right. So, funnily... Destiny's Gorge itself is locatable in Path of Fire, but the scar, you see this map near it, the scar, that is actually not. Basically, a tiny portion of the scar is visible in Guild Wars 2 and explorable in Guild Wars 2, but not much of it is. And it might be quite fitting when we say the scar in this game, what they're actually referring to as the scar is actually the chasm that runs through it with all the vegetation in it. So that's the scar on the Crystal Desert. It's not, you know, and I love the idea of that naming there, because a scar you'd think of as a negative thing and a wound and whatever, but it's, you know, it's like saying the vegetation is an infliction on the beautiful desolation of the desert, and you know. I like that, but in Guild Wars 2, it is genuinely scarred now with the brand. I don't know whether that was something the devs were setting up, but you get a tiny little area. Maybe where we're stood is like a branded section, but the rest of it is completely inaccessible. All of this is inaccessible. Look at how huge and vast it feels. The same is true for the Thirsty River. So one of the entire trials, right, and indeed the hardest one, the Thirsty River, and is mentioned in some of the NPC dialogue around Augury Rock in Path of Fire. This whole place here, the Thirsty River, you can't get to. It's like off on the right of the third map. So let's read about it. One look at this dry and desolate gorge tells the tale of its naming, where once flowed a mighty river that shaped the land over millennia. Now wind and sand make their way along the deep channels, now little more than an echo of the past. Oh my god, I love it. And if we actually enter the mission here, I'll show you a little bit more as we go a bit deeper. And this is kind of like the arena format where you'd fight amongst the ruined ships, as you can see here, once upon a time on this river. So none of this is actually accessible. I suppose as we move on, there's a little bit to talk about. So the last one is the Dunes of Despair. Some of this is available, not much of it, but the Throne of Palentia is. I talked about that on a recent VOD on Path of Fire. That absolutely is available here. This is where you kind of get to walk around where Chirai's people failed and the ruins of their skyscrapers and so forth. If we read the lore here, the barren desert landscape here is broken only by tall, surprisingly urban-like ruins that mark a people's failed attempt at ascension, made of wood from the ships that brought them to the desert's shores and bricks made of sand and mud. The structures have withstood the harsh desert weather surprisingly well. The people who built them, unfortunately, did not. And you kind of just find those ghosts around in this section. I suppose the last thing to talk about as well would be the Arid Sea, which is a bit difficult to get to, but it's from the Arid Sea we find a teleporter. A teleporter that was only added after Guild Wars Nightfall was introduced, and it's a teleporter that takes us even further south. When we go through that teleporter, we go beyond the black border at the bottom of the screen here. We actually go to Ilona, which has an entirely different world map. So if I load into here, you'll see we actually arrive way up at the north up here. And this whole bit here, the section between the two maps, that was never explorable. That was never directly, like, linked up until Path of Fire, until Guild Wars 2, until the third map, the Ellen Riverlands. This is roughly where the Bone Wall is and so forth. And so that was why, hopefully you guys get a perspective now of why that was such a cool thing to experience in the sequel. And so there you go, that's a bit of the Crystal Desert. I will see you guys next time for the Desolation, which is an entire region of its own with lots of stuff. We can see what the Bone Palace looked like in the original game, see what other areas never made it in, point out some other interesting landmarks. There were more I could have done in the Crystal Desert, really, like the Lonely Vigil and so forth, but I think you guys all get the picture. Thanks very much for watching. Let me know if this is the kind of thing you enjoy, and I'll see you next time.